All right, then. Well, good morning. Happy New Year. We're glad to be back with you. May it be a really good year. So this morning, before we start our practice, we are talking, as we said, about aspiration and inspiration. And these actually are really important for life, for practice, for relationships, because when you consider it, the aspiration that you have, we could say intention, to do something is crucial. Without aspiration or intention, we don't do anything at all. Isn't that true? Even something as simple as brushing your hair out of your face. Now, it seems like an automatic reaction to maybe a sense of straggles of hair across your face, but really, if you kind of settle down and look into the process there is an intention. There is, which I'm calling an aspiration. The Dhammapada, a very famous text of Buddhism from India, its first very famous verse is, "Mind runs before all things." That's one translation that I happen to like. In other words, before you do anything, before you say anything, before you jump up and clap or do anything whatsoever, there's some intention there. So everything we do depends actually on some intention, some aspiration. So we want to bring this to your attention this morning. And this is where we come to the famous story that some of you may know of Angulimala. Angulimala is the enfant terrible of the Buddhist tradition. He's the one who looks more hopeless than anybody, more hopeless than any of us, even in our worst self-assessments. Anguli means thumb. Mala means a necklace or rosary or garland. And when you see pictures of him at the height of his fame as Angulimala, you see him fiery, wrathful, with this big chain of human thumbs around him. Pretty horrific. So how did that happen? And what does that have to do with aspiration? So Angulimala actually had a teacher, presumably a Hindu teacher of some sort. I don't believe it's said who he was or what he was, but in any case, he was actually quite an exemplary student. He was meditating. He was on the path. And apparently he was a very attractive young fellow, and the guru's wife took a liking to him and did her best to seduce him. But of course, as a loyal and devoted student, Angulimala would have nothing to do with her in the way that she wished. She was angry. She told her husband, the guru, that Angulimala was doing his best to seduce her. So this teacher, who perhaps was not as totally accomplished as one might fantasize a teacher to be, took revenge. And he told Angulimala, if you really want to accomplish the path, I will give you a secret. I will tell you what to do. Oh, tell me, I will do it. You must cut off the thumbs of 1,000 people, string them around your neck, and with the 1,000th thumb, you will have complete enlightenment. Now, from Buddhist perspective, we might say that Angulimala was naive. He didn't think to himself, gee, that's a terrible thing to do. Of course, the first Buddhist precept is don't kill. But never mind that. He was devoted to his teacher, and he took on the task. And he had, in fact, cut off 999 thumbs. He was on the verge of success. And this is the point at which he runs into the Buddha for the very first time. Okay, Buddha is his 1,000th thumb. That's all he can think about. But then, as he makes it clear that this is his intention to the Buddha, he notices something that kind of begins to stop him in his tracks. He notices that unlike all of the other 999 people, Buddha does not run away in fear. He does not fight back in anger. And he also doesn't plead for his life. He's simply there. And he's so radiant and present and shining in this different way than Angulimala has ever experienced before, that Angulimala just has to ask, who are you? What are you? Why is it that you are not doing anything that, you're not running away, you're not attacking me, you're not begging for your life? Who are you? What's happened to you? And Buddha famously says, I have stopped. Can you? He has stopped. He has stopped unintended reactivity, which is another way of understanding samsara, cyclic existence, that we're trying to get out of, whether we understand it as habit patterns or an endless cycle of birth and death. All of these apply. I have stopped. Can you? I am free. You aren't, implicitly. Angulimala is still on the wheel, and he seems suddenly to understand this. He's still on the wheel that he was set upon by these wrongful instructions. His intentions are completely governed by a state of utter deception. Deception beginning with what the wife described him to be intending, which wasn't true. Mistaken instructions from the teacher, going out and killing people, causing harm of any kind is no way to further a spiritual path. So he decides to become the Buddha's student. He creates a whole new set of intentions. Creating a set of intentions, of aspirations, is something that we can practice at any time and is very, very useful. To set an intention and an aspiration that's realistic, that you actually do. We all, New Year's resolutions, I'm going to lose 50 pounds, I'm going to never get angry again. And then a few days later, we failed. Well, then it's all over. So it can be quite a skillful matter to set an intention that you can succeed at. Oh, I am going to go to bed half an hour earlier 3 times a week. Oh, you might really feel better after you do that. You'll have some success. I will stop having second desserts 3 times a week. I will watch half an hour less television 1 night a week. Something that you can actually do, because it's important to experience the success that you can have when you make an intention. I will sit for 5 minutes, morning or evening. And you do it. And you've done it. And it gives us great confidence. So proceeding along in this manner, and Angulimala became Buddha's student. He became a fully enlightened being. So none of us are hopeless. Have you killed 999 people? We all have the power to renovate our experience of life through our intentions, through our aspirations. And in order to do that, we need a particular skill that we can speak of as mindfulness. And we need not to confuse that with just completely pretending that we don't have any untoward wishes. And this is what Harvey's going to talk about.
So the Buddha taught Angulimala, and he taught many, many people over the course of a teaching career that lasted about 38 years, 48 years. So there were a lot of teachings, but in some ways they can be summed up under an umbrella term, which is very, very popular now, is the term mindfulness. And so at 11 o'clock, we'll be teaching a mindfulness of the breath, an attentional practice where we cultivate attention, noticing our breath. And so attention and mindfulness are skills, are an intention, an aspiration, as Anne said. And I just wanted to tweak and fine-tune one aspect of the practice of mindfulness, and specifically in relationship to one of the most ever popular themes in our lives, and that has to do with the issue of anger. So in a line, there is a discourse on mindfulness, and within that discourse, which is not short and it's not long, but it's medium length, but there's one line when the practitioner is developing mindfulness, they know an angry mind to be angry and a mind without anger to be without anger. So anger comes into a lot of negative press in almost all spiritual traditions, and in Buddhism it gets a fair bit of negative press as well. And many of us often fall to one of two extremes, and the one extreme is we may have a kind of problem with what in the psychotherapeutic world we call acting out anger, which is, I want to call you stupid and I just call you stupid. I want to punch you and I just punch you. I mean, that's acting it out. The other extreme is to be so buttoned down about anger that one is always restraining, suppressing, making believe one is a kind of a angel that maybe one learned in either a Catholic school or Jewish school or Buddhist school, and you walk around with a smile plastered on your face and an ulcer in your stomach. And so neither of those ultimately work for many, many reasons. One is harmful to others and one is harmful to self. And mindfulness practice is a little bit different. And it's actually hard to learn because it's a spot that we often don't have a lot of familiarity with, and that is to be aware of something like anger without acting it out and without squashing ourselves. And it is to actually allow the process of anger to be inhabiting our body and mind, and just to be with the impermanence of the process. Now, one of the practical tips with something like anger is that part of what seduces most of us into ultimately acting out anger is we get into the story. So that driver thinks they're the king of the road, and they just think they are some sort of hot piece of something, and I don't know who they think they are, but I've got to show them something, and they cut me off, so I'm going to cut them off, and I'm going to get them, and the last time that happened, I didn't show the person, and they did it again, and by God, I'm going to get over it this time, and we just, and we're kind of crafting a Hollywood blockbuster in our minds, and it's very, very seductive and very, very energizing. So practically speaking, for most people, it's advisable, if possible, to sort of decouple from the story and see if you can just let the story go. And that's a lot harder to do than to say. But then just watch the process of anger in the body and energy. How is this anger affecting me in my body? How is it affecting me in my energetic experience? And so we're turning inward. One of the things about the story is that we're turning outward. That person, oh, look at the hair they're wearing. I mean, they probably spent $95 at either the beauty salon if it's a woman or some guy's barbershop if it's a guy. Look at the clothing they're wearing. They think there's something in the car they're wearing. They've got a Porsche with bells and whistles. and I'm just driving my poor Subaru, and they think they got something over me. So the story is looking outward. And I don't know about traditional Buddhist cultures, but certainly in our culture, we are encouraged by consumerism to look outward. We don't even know how outward we look. We just were on retreat for, whether I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks. And, it's sort of like we decoupled from media for about 2.5 weeks. And it's sort of like, the phone. I mean, when am I going to get back on that phone and my computer and my email? And it's all outward gaze. And it's really, really hard to fully appreciate how deep that ingrained energy of looking outward is. And so when some other makes us angry, it's very easy to go look outside. So we don't turn inward. And really, in some ways, I could say, one of the most significant movements in our spiritual life is to turn from looking outward to looking inward, to giving up that story about that person with their clothing and their hair and their Porsche, to looking at what's it like in my body and mind, and I'm giving up the story for me just to be angry, and to allow that process of anger just to have its natural sort of history and to be mindful of it. And again, this is easier said than done, but a guarantee is that however angry you are, I will bet $1 million that the process of your anger will be impermanent. I know that you will have to go to sleep within, whether it's going to be 24 or 48 hours. Minimally, when you sleep, that particular anger will have dissipated. And it's usually actually a matter of minutes. Maybe a big thing, maybe even a few hours. But typically, if we just let go of the story and we observe the energy, our emotions are all sort of like waves. And if we don't fight it, and if we don't put Miracle Grow on it with more and more story, and we just let the energetic process unfold of itself, there'll be a kind of an arising, an abiding, and there'll be a ceasing. All of our ordinary states, body and mind, are impermanent. This is one of the most simple, real, in tune with science, and profound observations of Buddhist practice. And one of the places where it can be very, very practical is to be mindful of states that are distressing. Very, very hard. Very, very hard. Because we get identified and absorbed into the stories. We get identified and absorbed into a kind of moral high ground. I am right and they are wrong. And it may be. It may be, in fact, that they spend $75 on a hairdo and that they have a wonderful Porsche and that they don't give a crap about you. All that may be true, but it's kind of irrelevant. If we start becoming attentive to ourselves and look inward and really start feeling what it feels like to be angry, it's very, very difficult. It's very, very difficult to observe. And part of the reason it's difficult to observe is it's so painful. It's so painful to be that angry. It really does interesting and kind of hard to stay with things to the body and to the energy. And if we observe it, we notice that it arises and it ceases. We do, in our framework, feel that internally we all have what's called Buddha nature. It's something beyond the ordinary states of change, beyond comings and goings of the waves of things like anger. But in order to get in touch with this sublime realization, we do need to turn inward. We have to start easing up our addiction to the outward gaze and begin to have some interest as to what is going on internally, both conventionally in terms of the to and fro of all of these reactive emotions that we have, until we can arrive at something that's much deeper and more peaceful and more worthwhile. And the avenue with which we do this is a very, very simple practice. Ultimately, really, the awareness that we'll be teaching at 11, where we're mindful of our breathing and we're just steady and in tune with what is going on in our breath. And we're giving up the stories and we're giving up the feelings that are occurring. Here we're just focusing on the breath. If it's anger, we may just be focusing on the processes of the mind and the body. We take the intention and the aspiration that Anne spoke of, and we start observing what's going on inside. And it's hard in a way to believe that paying attention to something as gross and distressing and disturbing as anger is, that cultivating the attention and the mindfulness, that mind state, which is really a reflection of our Buddha nature to begin with, that itself becomes a path to awakening and becoming in tune with and eventually reflecting and manifesting our deepest Buddha nature. But that is the case. And so it's a very, very simple to describe practice, but if you want to see how hard Buddhist practice is, the next time somebody presses your particular button, see if you can start observing what's going on energetically and give up the story. And the other thing that this is not doing is it's not kind of squashing the anger down. It's not saying, oh, I'm a terrible person because I think that other driver's a son of it, whatever. I'm terrible. I shouldn't be angry. I'm not angry. I'm a happy person. I'm happy day. I never get angry. Whoop-de-doo. And some of us have more skill at that and are more oriented towards doing that. But that has its own costs typically, either in the 10 years of calm and then one day the person blows up and loses their mind, or there are often psychosomatic issues that arise if people are suppressing and restraining all the time. It's a definite sweet spot to be allowing a process to occur naturally. We have a big phrase in what we teach. Sometimes we like to maybe translate it as not tinkering, not contriving. We tend to contrive and tinker with almost all of our experience in lives. And mindfulness is learning an art of not tinkering and not contriving. And again, it's quite easy to say, but quite challenging to develop the skill of, here I am, I'm angry, I feel it, there's a story going which I'm going to let go of, and I'm just going to observe these rather disturbing sensations in my body and this rather disturbing energy in my body, and just see how it proceeds. But that is the profound skill we are teaching when we teach the meditation on attention that we're about to do, where we're observing either the sound that we chant or observing the process and uniting with the process of breathing. I'll leave you with that. We can take about a 2-minute break.
Stretch if you like. Feel spacious. Don't feel restrained. Don't act out too much.